So, what is so educational about Victorian architecture and fashion? Let's start with Victorian architecture. We have an example, the Palace of Westminster. The palace has a Gothic or else Elizabethan style. It serves as an answer to catastrophes and as a reconstruction example. Also, it serves as a layout for the birth, for a newly born statehood. The Palace of Westminster is a purpose-built structure for the Houses of the Parliament. It is a beautiful lake of all settled societal purposes and an entitlement to the common civic feeling, a center for the people's unification. Also, it is the peaceful appeasement place of the popular sense. The Palace of Westminster, it was to be rebuilt upon the original site, and here we have the repatriation element. After an open architectural competition, and here we discern an element of openness to the participation of more. We have also an inclusion of the tradition, of the history roots. The style of the architecture becomes a political choice. The Britain's national style is reflected as opposed to the classical style, the style of the ancient Greece or the ancient Rome. The Britain's national style as opposed to the French Revolution and Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a strong opposition as an identical treasureness, as a mark of an exceptional nationality. And we have like a window to visionary astonishments expected in the future. It was stated that the Palace of Westminster was nothing short of a miracle, that it was the scene, the witness, the living associate of so many of the most ancient and noble passages of English history. Gothic originated in Britain. It is a religious resonance as the style of the great British medieval cathedrals. We have a strong religion insistence, and the palace became the home of the British politics. But wasn't Gothic style too backward-looking for a modern parliamentary legislature? It was rather a frame for a long-anticipated political institution genesis. Charles Barry won the architectural competition. His choice was of perpendicular Gothic. His choice was about elevations, decorative sculpture and motifs of the chapel, and portcullis. These all were symbols of political stability and social order. The Victoria Tower, the now world-famous tower that houses the Big Ben, it is like a bell of the world's pace, a world that continues to move under royal auspice and guardianship. As regards the exterior facades, we had about 200 sculptures of monarchs, consorts and bishops. We had a continuity with ancient royal Christian and political past, conservative as a response to the rapid social changes and unrest, basically resulting from the Industrial Revolution. The style became a recommendation, a political recommendation, as a reassuring reformist chant against the noisy and chaotic industrial noise. The balance of the political powers between the three parts of the Constitution was also reflected. We had the royal apartments, the most ornate, the House of Lords, less so, and the House of Commons, which were relatively plain. The decoration part. A fine art commission was composed with Prince Albert as chairman, and it was in high contrast with what was long affirmed as God help the minister who meddles in art. We also had an influence of heroic models, Arthurian legend, Tudor dynasty, and sculptures of Magna Carta barons. This reflected a belief in rights, people's rights, a belief in the existing contracting liaison of the principals to the people. For the corridors connecting the Lord's Chamber to the Commons' Chamber, we had depictions of the English Civil War or the Glorious Revolution, but not depictions of national division and strife. Instead, we had a reconciliation spirit, revelations of individual heroism or sacrifice, and that was a fair and constructive interpretation. For example, we had depicted the burial of Charles I, but not his execution. The Lord's Chamber was basically a partnership of Barry and Pigeon. We had richness and color, vivid medieval ornament, statues of Magna Carta barons, as we said, and these all were a source of national pride. As it was phrased by Illustrated London News, without doubt, the finest specimen of Gothic civil architecture in Europe, worthy of the great nation at whose cost it has been erected. This was above the Palace of Westminster. In fact, architecture was based on both parts of the Constitution. We had monarchy and the House of Lords, the dignified parts, and the House of Commons, which reflected the efficient parts by which it works and rules. Monarchy was seen through its architecture. It was seen as a national figurehead, a state ceremony, a theatrical institutionalism, and it contained an element of timelessness as a disguise to societal and political changes. And now let's move on to the Victorian fashion and its reflections. In the Victorian era, the female body was dressed to emphasize a woman's separation from the world of work. Women's clothes mirror women's fashion. By wearing dresses resembling interior furnishings, women became walking symbols of their social function. That means wife, mother, and domestic manager. We have a more sexual fashion, exaggeration of the hips, buttocks, and breasts. With crinolines, hoop skirts, and corsets, these all are heavy fabrics, nipping in the waist and thrusting out the breasts. They serve to underline a woman's prime function, but also the physical constraints on her activities. For example, it was difficult to move freely wearing corset that made it hard to breathe. This sort of Victorian fashion is teaching us on the domestic function par excellence, the marital harmony based on the female domestic virtue, the constant devotion to the woman's husband and her God, and her moral duty towards the family, her husband, and society as a whole. This fashion is shaping therefrom a moral superiority of the woman. The woman is the welcoming haven for the man of the house, is busy, able, and upright figure in the service of the others. The woman is always with an innate moral goodness. This fashion is translated into her domestic virtue. She is the architect of the home, and it depends on her skill, her foresight, her soft arranging touches, whether it shall be the lodestar to all hearts, or whether it shall be a house from which her husband and children are glad to escape to the street, the theatre, or the tavern. The sphere of her cultural influence is defined by her clothes. Her clothes speak of her altruistic, protective spirit. The woman acquires her personal public universe to demonstrate her power. Motherhood becomes a sweet vocation, an affirmation of her identity. She also carries a social responsibility to visit the homes of the poor to export her expertise. She becomes the lady philanthropist, that is a means to her self-discovery. The clothes that speak par excellence of her maternal reverence are rendering her as a lady reformer with a personal touch. She also has a religious commitment. She serves at Sunday schools, the female-run benevolent societies. In fact, her moral mission gradually transformed into a political mission. This is a strive for her right to better education, better employment opportunities, and finally, her right to vote. So, all in all, this was some piece of my humble insight about the Victorian era. Thank you very much for your attention.